Our 68 Camaro was a pretty clean car when we first looked at it, but when you start peeling away the layers, you find out that there's some crash damage and some rust and some ugliness under the surface. So the next step was to replace the passenger side quarter panel. Now people are always asking about how big of a job is it to do a quarter panel replacement, and it's not that bad provided you take the right steps. In our case, we like to make sure that the body tub is completely stripped, there's no interior, there's no glass, there's no rubber weather strip, and we mount it securely on a jig that we made that's designed to hold a Camaro tub. Our jig actually has interchangeable legs, we can put different cars on it, but in this case it's fixtured where the Camaro suspension would attach to the Camaro body. And this way we're making sure that nothing's flexing or changing, it's not on its wheels on the ground, it's up in the air, and you're not fighting, working around tires and things like that. So the higher you can get the car off the ground, generally the easier this becomes. If you don't have access to a jig, mount the car on its axles, but take the wheels off so you have access to get inside the wheel tub areas. Like most metal repairs, the first step is to find where all the welds are that hold everything together. And in this case, quarter panels are resistance spot welded from the factory, so you can drill these welds out. You'll find them through the whole wheel tub lip area, along the bottom of the back edge of the car. They go into the trunk area, and then there's a lead-filled seam at the roof. You take the lead out and you can drill those out. The edge at the back of the door, the front of the quarter panel, where it meets the door edge, is hiding some spot welds in there too. And you just need to take a bunch of time to drill all those out. We decided to make things a little quicker and broke out the plasma torch to cut a window in our quarter panel once we drilled the spot welds off the wheel tub lip. This gave us access to the wheel tub, because a lot of times you'll find rust and damage to the wheel tub once you get past the quarter panel. We got a new wheel tub from Classic Industries, anticipating replacing the whole thing, but it turned out we only had a small area that had some rust in it, so we carefully cut that rusty section out of the original wheel tub and then trimmed the new piece from Classic Industries to fit the hole. And we welded that in using a technique to leave no visible seam. There were some plug welds around the outside edge to replicate factory-style plug welds, but the majority of it was a clean butt-welded seam. Once the welds were complete, we ground down that seam, and then you can't really tell anything ever happened. At that point, we grabbed the plasma torch again and cut the rest of the skin off, and this gave us access to the back side of that wheelhouse to finish that grinding operation, but it also allowed us to get our drill in to finish removing some difficult to reach spot welds from the factory. You'll also notice some bracing we welded into the trunk. This was designed to keep the rain gutter and weather strip ledge in place, because when you take the quarter panel off, everything's going to move. And that's another important point. We want to make sure that we have a deck lid in place and that that gap is pretty much set and that the door is in place, so that when you take the quarter panel off, you have reference points so you put your new panel on in the right position. We see a lot of people that take off all kinds of panels. They'll pull the rear deck lid, the doors, the quarter panel, the rear window filler, the tail pan, take them all off, and then when they start putting the car back together, nothing lines up because they lost all the reference points. So you want to be kind of conservative on that approach. Once the entire quarter was removed and all the edges were kind of ground clean and all the spot welds were removed, we media blasted the whole exposed structure. The wheel tub, the vertical structure inside the roof area, the areas behind the door jamb, and then we shot them all with a BASF black epoxy primer. And this is to make sure that nothing rusts inside there. This epoxy is going to seal that up nice and tight, and it'll be resistant to moisture and whatnot, for a long, long time. Now we noticed that the support structure right behind the door was actually not fully spot welded from the factory.
When I was hammering on the bottom here, none of these welds held and it just kind of fell out like that. So we drilled all of them out. We're going to actually weld it on this time.
Nick removed that original piece, cleaned it all up, pounded it back straight. reinstalled it, clamped it, screwed it, and then welded the whole thing back together, and then it's stuck for good.
Hey look, it's welded in.
Now it's time to start fitting the new panel. And the quarter panel that we used is a full quarter, which means it goes all the way to the roof. It has the complete door jamb. It wraps around to the tail pan area, and it has that rain gutter for the deck lid. And this came from Classic Industries. They come in a variety of different sizes. You can get something smaller that's a quarter panel skin that doesn't go all the way to the roof, but we wanted to utilize as many original mounting points as possible. And to fit these things, you got to put them in place and sheet metal screw them in place and clamp them and push on them and pull them and pound on them. You know, Nathan had a lot of time into making that tail pan match the quarter panel in the right place, because every car is different. And we had learned that our Camaro had gotten hit in the rear section, so everything was a little bit distorted back there, and you know, trying to fix all that, you really have to kind of push these panels around sometimes. But overall, the accuracy of the panel was really, really nice. The body lines were nice and crisp. The gauge of steel is dead on. So it took the guys a little while to get it fitted up right, and this is where a lot of the time comes in too. If you want the car to fit properly, you need to take the time to fit the panel. Once the panel is in the right place, it's time to weld it so it stays. There's a couple different weld operations. Mostly it's plug welds, where you have a hole in the new panel and you fill it with weld to mate it to the panel underneath it. There's very few seams that get welded up. Most of it ends up being a lot of different plug welds. And these start in the door jamb area. Everything gets clamped together and screwed together and plug welded. The tail pan area of the car, the gutter around the deck lid area, and then in the wheelhouse, and then the roof. And once everything's welded together, you go back through and grind all those welds down to make it look like they never happened. A nice clean spot is where that front of the quarter panel meets the rocker panel. That stuff gets ground down so that it didn't look like there was ever any welds there, which is kind of how it looked from the factory, and that's what we're trying to recreate. After the grind operation, Nathan went through the roof seams and replaced the original factory lead with an Eastwood Body Solder kit that uses a lead substitute. It still acts like lead, but it doesn't have the lead in it, so that it's safer to grind on. You heat the panel, you clean it with some flux, and dab in the lead, the quote-unquote lead, rods, and mash them down with a wooden paddle. Once it's cool, you can sand and file it and shape it, and there you go. That's the whole quarter panel replacement. Luckily, the other side of the car didn't require an entire panel, just a few patches, but the body tub is coming together on the '68 Camaro.